welcome back to yet another episode of Auburn Anonymous. I'm your host, Miles Espy. You can find me on X at Ashton Daniels AA. I am joined by my co-host, Michael Espy. You can find him on X at Jackson Arnold AA. Used to be Peyton Thorne AA. Michael, how are you doing on this lovely Monday, January 6th, a momentous day in our country's history?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Auburn obviously beat Missouri pretty easily. That game went as expected about the score that I had before the game. Nothing going on in the SEC tonight, so just kind of hanging out. Looking forward to tomorrow.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this for a while. Last week we had the SEC basketball deep dive, and now we're kind of going back, taking a step back. We're going to be looking at the results. First week of SEC basketball, taking a look at some of the future games, what we think is going to happen, and how the teams look, that kind of thing. But before we do that, we're going to jump back into Auburn football since we did not do that this past week. I guess before we jump into Auburn football, there's been a lot of other football being played, playoffs and bowl games. A lot of other SEC teams have been playing. Fortunately, most of them have been losing. One of the things that I've really taken away from this, and I might get some heat for this, and this year, the Big Ten was better than the SEC. Do you agree?
Yeah, and at one point I would have told you the SEC is a deeper conference, but I feel like these bowl games kind of proved I was wrong. I mean, if you look at the middle of the Big Ten, you got teams like Washington, you got teams like, Michigan. They were upper middle, but these teams that weren't even top Big Ten teams are beating SEC teams. Illinois, they look pretty good. You look at the worst of the Big Ten. Purdue, I would say it's pretty equivalent to our worst of Mississippi State. I think the Big Ten was a slightly better conference. I don't expect that to keep up. I think a lot of the SEC quarterbacks were disappointments, such as Carson Beck and Jalen Milroe. Both were expected Heisman candidates who now we're not even sure they'll be. They were both first rounders. Now we're not even sure if they'll go first or second round.
Yeah, Jalen Milroe, huge disappointment. When he announced he was going to the NFL, a part of me was like, okay, sweet. Like, he's gone, but a part of me is like, do we want him back?
No, I think Jalen Milroe is a really good quarterback. I think he'll be pretty good in the NFL. I think as an Auburn fan, and I'm not even trying to throw a shot at Alabama, we haven't been too great over the years. And I think when a fan base starts struggling, the first thing every fan base does is attack the quarterback. And I don't think Auburn's
never done that. Auburn's never done that.
Yeah, it's never the coach's fault. And you look at Jalen Milroe. When Nick Saban is coach, he was coming back as the top Heisman candidate in the country this year. And let's just be honest, he regressed this year. He got worse. And I think that involves coaching. I think you should get the most out of your players. And I think coaching's the problem there. I don't think it's the quarterback play. He's not great at reading defenses, but they'll find a role for him in the NFL, whether that's quarterback or, he could come in on special type packages plays. I mean, he is really fast for a quarterback, and he's a big guy. He's kind of like Lamar Jackson. And I think if Lamar wasn't a quarterback, they could still find a role for him in the NFL.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's a part of me, like, he struggles at times, but when he's on, he is on. And, if they don't have him next year, their starting quarterback's going to be Ty Simpson. We'll see what happens there. But there was more than just – I'm sorry.
Yeah, Keelan Russell as well. He was the number 2 ranked quarterback at a high school. He was at the Under Armour All-America game this past week saying that he's coming to start year 1. And you don't hear that from many freshman quarterbacks. Personally, as an Auburn fan, I would love it if they started a true freshman quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
I do think he's going to be very good, though. He threw like 47 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. One – it was technically a fumble, but the Blake Woodby, the Auburn committee, actually picked him off. But they called it a fumble because it was like a screen that technically went like a yard backwards. But he didn't. He threw like 47 touchdowns in the hardest division of Texas, no picks. He's going to be a good quarterback. But again, year 1, between him, Austin Mack, and Ty Simpson, they're going to have a bottom half SEC quarterback this year.
Oh, and it might even be bottom 4th. But one thing I do have to say, an official prediction I'm going to give, Keelan Russell. If he's the cat I saw on social media who was driving 89 and posted that on social media, he's going to end up transferring to Georgia at some point.
Yeah.
That's my bold prediction. But you look around, it wasn't just Alabama just absolutely embarrassing the SEC against Michigan, which of course they did. It was also South Carolina. They should have beaten Illinois. That was, you pointed that one out. Then also Texas A&M. I mean, they've just fallen off a cliff. Maybe they weren't that good and just played a cupcake schedule until they ran into Auburn. Maybe that's the case, but then they couldn't beat USC, who they weren't that special in the Big Ten. Look at the teams in the SEC that did win. Before I do that, I forgot about Tennessee losing in the college football playoff, just getting dominated. Georgia lost in a close one to Notre Dame. Well, kind of close, but not really close. Honestly, they got dominated by Notre Dame. But I kind of excused them because Carson Beck was out. I mean, looking at SEC teams that won their bowl games, you had Florida against Tulane, whose quarterback had left. And then I think Missouri barely beat Iowa. That might be it.
Ole Miss. Ole Miss beat Duke against their third string quarterback. Arkansas beat Texas Tech, pretty sure against their backup quarterback. Vanderbilt obviously won.
Okay, well, I'm missing a lot of them. So we won more games than I realized. Big Ten's just been better.
Yeah, we just lost to the Big Ten.
Well, do you think this will be a thing we see going forward into next year? That, not necessarily one team. Do you think? I don't think so. I think there's. Well, what do you think?
I think we're going to see the SEC will continue to be the best conference, but it won't be as dominant as it's been in the past. I don't think you're going to have these Alabama and Georgia, like how they've been the past few years, pretty much just completely controlling college football. Because at the end of the day, I feel like Alabama, Nick Saban's a great coach, great at getting talent, but at the end of the day, I think a lot of that was they were paying players before everyone else was, and it might not even be that, but they were doing a dang good job of paying the players better than every other team was, because the way they were recruiting was absolutely insane. It's a more even playing field now that everybody can pay, and I think you're going to see the likes of Texas, Oregon, Michigan, Ohio State, other guys like that are going to be. They might be able to put together a better roster than Alabama and Georgia, and it's already seeming to show with these playoffs and how they've went so far.
Yeah, so that actually, what you're saying there of seeing new teams that we haven't seen in a while, not that they're not good programs, new teams we haven't seen in a while, kind of at the top of the list, kind of brings me to something I saw the other day, which is on 3. They put out their way, way, way too early 2025 top 10 by Mr. Andy Staples and Ari Wasserman. Probably butchered that name, but I don't care. Cool if I give you that top 10, Michael. You ready for it?
Yeah.
All right, number 1, Texas. Number 2 is Oregon. Number 3 is Ohio State. 4 is Penn State. 5 is Notre Dame. So those so far are getting a lot of the same teams. 6, Georgia. Okay. 7, South Carolina. Hadn't seen them in the top 10 in a while. 8, Clemson. I mean, you have seen them in recent history, but not the last couple years. Number 9, Florida. Of course, they're a huge program. Haven't been that great the last few years. And number 10, Auburn. The Auburn Tigers, though, I just went 5 and 7, are number 10, and they're way, way, way too early top 10. And these are not 2 Auburn fans, mind you. This is On 3, a reputable, completely neutral website. What in the world's going on there?
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to be a top 10 team in the preseason bowls. I almost will definitely tell you we won't be, but I guarantee you we'll be a preseason top 25 team. You look at this roster, it's just these people just know what they're talking about. You look at Auburn's best players this past year, most of them were true freshmen, and so they're only going to improve and get better. So we've returned all these star receivers, all returned. We added the number 1 receiver in the transfer portal. I actually don't think running back will really take much of a step down, if any at all. One, I don't think Hugh Freeze really wants to use the running back as much as he's done these first 2 years at Auburn if he doesn't have to.
Yeah.
But I really like Damari Alston and Jeremiah Cobb being the 1 and 2. I think that's a top upper half of the SEC. And then
there's no question it is.
But I think at the end of the day, these rankings are saying one thing, that these guys believe in Jackson Arnold as quarterback. I mean, he was just in a terrible situation this year, so we'll see. But at the end of the day, that's what this team's going to revolve around, is how good is Jackson Arnold, and how good is he with these receivers he has this year.
Yeah, to me, it's Auburn next year is very high risk, high reward at the early look. I mean, of course, there's still the other transfer portal window. There's other things that can absolutely happen, injuries that can come up. But we're a very high risk, high reward team. The defense was even solid this year, and we return most of our defense, and we lose really our defensive problems with, and some of our offensive problems when it comes to Percy Lewis and Keontae Scott. I mean, nothing against those two guys personally, but thank the Lord those guys won't be in Auburn uniforms next year. Blaming Auburn players besides Peyton Thorne, we'll do that there. But thank God those guys won't be our problems next year. And look at the bright spots on defense, especially. I guess the main bright spot to me is Keldrick Falk. I mean, that guy is just like he's a first-round NFL pick, and we're going to have him on our roster next year. It's very exciting. Yeah. And people, you're right, they're very high on Arnold, as they should be. I mean, he's the highest-rated Auburn quarterback commit in history. I mean, in history of all the great quarterbacks who've worn the orange and blue, he's number one. And sure, he didn't look great last year, but as you noted before, his situation wasn't great. And another reason is, sure, he's high risk, high reward, but last year we had the high risk, no reward. Peyton Thorne didn't do anything. So if Arnold can just come in and be, a little bit better than average, we're easily a top 25 team.
Yeah, and you see some of these people saying, "Oh, look at Peyton Thorne's numbers; they improved year 1 to year 2." All those stats that he put up were against Alabama A&M and Louisiana Monroe. That's like half of his passing touchdowns on the year. In my eyes, he didn't improve too much. I mean, he looked great in that Oklahoma game up until the real end. But again, he choked. And so I'm just excited not to have a quarterback who's going to be a deer in taillights this year. Arnold makes quick decisions. He's also just a better runner. Over 100 yards rushing versus Alabama. So yeah, it's exciting. The defensive line, as you said, as Keldrick Falk returned most of the guys that were contributors on the defense line this year, and then you add probably the best defensive line class in the history of Auburn recruiting, if you just look at it from a SAR basis with all the guys they got coming in. So yeah, defensive line to stack. The secondary, you bring Caleb Harris is back, was a 3-star, was an amazing safety last year. Jalen Crawford, the freshman from this past year, he was a 3-star as well, played way better than that rating. You have Kayan Lee back in the secondary. And then you added Anquan Fagans, who was the better safety when Caleb Harris and him were on the same team in high school. You got Eric Winters coming in, a top-ranked 4-star. Everyone in the country wanted him. I think this secondary's position you can come in early and play at if you have the talent to do so. And I think Auburn's pretty stacked at the D-line and secondary. I will say I'm a little concerned about linebacker. I'm there with you. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure who we're going to have there. I think that says that obviously we have DeMarcus Riddick, who will improve. I mean, we really basically just threw him in there as a quarterback spy. But once he really learns how to play the position, he's going to be one of the best linebackers in the SEC. And I think you didn't see many Auburn linebackers hit the transfer portal, which shows me that Auburn kind of just believes in the guys they already have on the roster. They didn't really attempt to go out and get many linebackers, or it didn't seem like it, at least. So it tells me Hugh Freeze and them believe in the guys that are currently on the roster. So yeah, I think a top 10 rating's fair. I think of the teams of that top 10, I would say, in my opinion, the only there's 3 teams that I didn't hear on that top 10 that I feel like should be in front of Auburn. You got LSU, who I think could be the best. If talking right now, they're my pick to win the SEC next year. I think Garrett Nussmeier's going to be the best quarterback in the SEC.
He's good.
Yeah,
people are sleeping on them. I totally agree.
Yeah, they've done a really good job in the portal. I think Texas A&M should be up there too. I think they're going to be right up there contending with LSU. They obviously Marcel Reed's back, the quarterback, and they returned a lot, and they absolutely killed it in the transfer portal, especially at receiver. Added Micah Hudson, who was a 5-star in the 2024 class. Kevin Concepcion, who was the number 2 ranked receiver after Eric Singleton. He's a second or third round guy, I guarantee you, in the draft next year. He's only been in college football 2 years, and this will be his last year in college football. They're going to be a team to watch out for. And then I think also you got to put the Tennessee Volunteers up there as well. They lost, I think, 9 of their 11 receivers or something crazy like that. They lost maybe 8 of their 11 scholarship receivers. But at the end of the day, Tennessee got to the college football playoff because of their schedule. and they have the same schedule again next year. And I feel like it sets up pretty nicely for them to be back in the college football playoffs again. And I'll even say that, I know I've just babbled off, but I don't think Florida's got a really tough schedule. Again, I think DJ Lagway's good, but I don't think he's going to be good enough to carry them to a top 10 ranking. And South Carolina, kind of the same deal. I'm not huge believers in them. I like Lenore Sellers, but I'm not fully. He kind of reminds me of Jalen Milroe.
Yeah, you actually hit exactly what I was about to hit. South Carolina, Florida. I think they're both fantastic, but I think for both teams, people are like overbuying on them. Like people are overly hyping them up. They're both very good teams, and quite frankly, like I have no hate on them starting in the top 10. Like they probably deserve it, but I think they're getting overly too much credit. Maybe not. We'll see. But I tend to think they're being overly hyped up. But a team we haven't talked about at all as being a team that should be in it or is in it is Alabama. And not just Alabama. Georgia's in it. But when's the last time we haven't seen Alabama not even in the discussion about being in the top 10? And then Georgia not in the top 5?
Yeah. I mean, this goes to what I was saying earlier. It's fair game now for everyone. They can't just go out and get every single 5-star in the country anymore. And so it's going to be an equal playing field for these teams. So it's going to go down to coaching. And Alabama's roster, in my opinion, isn't going to be as good as it was this year. They've already lost 24 guys to the transfer portal, plus all the guys they have that have left for the NFL. They've got, I know Jermani Bernard is one of their receivers who's still questioning whether he's going to go to the draft or stay in college. But that offense, it could end up being good, and I could be wrong. There's not a lot of, besides Ryan Williams, there's not a lot of proof in the pudding with that offense. They lost a starting offensive tackle just yesterday. Alabama, I'm not too confident in them next year, but I mean, they'll be a top 25 team. I just don't think they're top 10.
I'm actually very confident in Alabama. I'm very confident that they're going to be falling off. I don't think they're going to be that good next year. Mm-hmm. But that's what I'm confident in. Now, since last week, Michael, as I'm sure you can remember, we did the You're Fired segment for college basketball, talking about SEC coaches who are going to get fired at the end of the season. Are you ready to do the same thing for the way, way, way too early 2025 Auburn Anonymous You're Fired for college football?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, first on the list, Michael, who do you have on the You're Fired list?
I think the number one coach that's 100% going to be fired next year is going to be Mark Stoops. You look at what he's done. He's lost almost every single receiver they have on their roster to the transfer portal that was any good. They ended up bringing in Zach Calzada to come in to start at quarterback for this year. It's been an absolute disaster for Kentucky. They would have fired him this year, but they didn't want to pay the buyout. So I think I think they're just literally sitting out this year. And I think the plan is to fire him at the end of the year. And, yeah, if you're a Kentucky fan, you just got to be focusing on basketball right now because this football program is just trending down. And I just don't see a path to where this team could even make a bowl next year.
Mark Stoops. Yeah, a lot of people were surprised he didn't get the can this year.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you want, I will move into the second coach on the You're Fired list, if you'd like. For me, the second coach on the list, too, I won't say he's 100% going to get fired next year, but I'm pretty confident he's getting fired next year. Kalen DeBoer, University of Alabama. You know, replacing Nick Saban, nearly an impossible task. I'll give him that. But losing 4 games with this team is as bad of a coaching job as I think I've ever seen in the SEC. You had one of the most talented rosters recruited by the greatest coach of all time, and you take that and you lose to Michigan, or you lose to Vanderbilt, you lose to 6-6 Oklahoma, 6-7, excuse me. I mean, how bad of a coach could you be? You and I could do better than that playing Dynasty on NCAA 25. It's pathetic.
Yeah.
And then you look at what's going on into future years. They're not recruiting as well. They open up next year against a hungry Florida State team in Tallahassee, I believe. They play at Georgia. They have to go to Auburn. You think that it was bad You think the Alabama fans going after him now for not making the playoff is bad? Wait until they go into Jordan Hare and play a top 10, according to On3, Auburn team and lose by double digits. Imagine how they're going to be calling for his head then. Kalen DeBoer, you had a nearly impossible task. I'll give you that. But you failed. And Kalen, you're fired.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to have to win at least 10 games next year. Or, I mean, he's kind of in the same situation where a lot of these coaches are. Jimmy Sexton's been negotiating them buyouts that schools just don't want to pay. So, I mean, he has a pretty big contract, and they paid him a lot to leave Washington. And so I know the school's not going to want to pay him I mean, their athletic director was over there begging for NIL just a week ago. So, I mean, they can't have that much money. And so I don't even know if they can afford to fire him, but these fans are going to absolutely hate him after this year. There's no using the quarterback as an excuse anymore.
Yeah. And as we've discussed, they are going to fire him at the end of the next season. That's just going to happen. And they are going to hire Lane Whiffen as their new coach because he's always whiffing on the recruiting trail, usually losing to Hugh Freeze. So I really hope they hire Lane Whiffen so he can continue to whiff in the state of Alabama.
Yeah, I think Whiffen is going to would be their top choice. I mean, I think he's kind of showing himself right now. What he's doing at Ole Miss is kind of the max he can possibly do. I don't think it gets much better than the roster they had this year over at Ole Miss. They're a team I expect to kind of drop off next year. They're banking on Austin Simmons because he had one good drive versus UGA. Well, there's a lot of good quarterbacks. There's a lot of quarterbacks who have had one good drive versus UGA. They lost a ton of those receivers.
Peyton Thorne had a couple of good ones this year.
Yeah, exactly. I don't see. I mean, Ole Miss has been pretty good in the portal. I'll give them that, but the roster's just not as good as it was this year. So something has to change. But I do think Lane Kiffin's one of the better play callers in the SEC. So there's a chance. But yeah, it's not looking good in Tuscaloosa right now.
It's not looking good at all. Anyone else you want to add to the You're Fired list?
Yeah. I think Brent Venables is going to get fired after this year. I think he's right up there with Mark Stoops. Mark Stoops just clearly has an awful team this year. But you look at Oklahoma. Yes, they got the number one player in the portal, John Mateer. But it's kind of the same situation they were in this past year. Who's he going to throw to? They lost their top target in Bo Sharp. They lost all those receivers who were hurt throughout the year. I just don't see this going too well for him this year. I don't think Brent Venables probably should have just stayed at Clemson. He had a great role over there as their defensive coordinator. He might even end up back over there. He's just completely underperformed at Oklahoma. The highlight, if they didn't beat Alabama, I don't even know if he would have made it to this next upcoming year. But you got John Mateer. He's a Washington State quarterback. I mean, they had a really easy schedule this year. It's not like Cam Ward, who was throwing against those Pac-12 defenses. I'm not convinced this John Mateer guy is as good as everyone's hyping him up to be. I think Oklahoma is going to be a 6-6, 5-17 this year. So I don't think that. I think if they go 6-6, I think he gets fired. So I'll put him on that list as well.
I think he belongs there, and I think. Something I'd like to, note. A lot of Auburn fans wanted Mateer as the number one, and you and I always wanted Arnold number one. I mean, Mateer, I think he's solid, but he doesn't have the ceiling that Arnold does. And also, I think the situation for him at Washington State was great, playing the easier teams and such. But again, he put up 14, and they lost to Wyoming. I just wasn't as big on the guy. I think he's solid. He would have been a good backup option if Arnold or Malik Murphy didn't work out, but I'm very happy with who we got. Do you have anyone else to add to the list? If not, I have one honorable mention I'd like to add.
Yeah, I got one, and then I'll throw in an honorable mention as well. I think Sam Pittman will get fired. I think they wanted to fire him after this year, but he did almost just enough to not get fired. I will say about Sam Pittman, he kind of saved his job this year. He has he has one of the best offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator duos in the country with Bobby Petrino and Travis Williams. It doesn't get much better than that, and I think they kind of saved a job. But if you look what happened in the transfer portal, all their best players left, and most of them left for other SEC schools. So it's not looking good for him over there. But yeah, they coached. I mean, this year their wins were coaching. They beat Auburn because of coaching, wasn't because of talent. So
and the refs.
Yeah, yeah. They again, maybe I don't think they're going to make a bowl game next year. They might go 6-6. I don't know. I think if they go 6-6, he might even get fired off that. I think a losing record gets him fired, and then I don't know if your honorable mention's the same as mine, but I'll just go ahead and say mine.
Okay, yeah.
Mine would be Billy Napier. I think he's another guy. I think he was a guy everyone almost penciled in to get fired before the year. Mm-hmm. He had probably the hottest seat going into the season. I think they went 8-5. The only reason you don't want to fire him is because you want DJ Lagway to stay, and so I think that's what kind of saves him from getting fired after this season, almost regardless of what he does.
Yeah, my honorable mention was different. I was just going to say Jeff Levy over at Mississippi State. Really, I think he's a good coach. I mean, it might be one of those deals where he's just a good OC, not a good coach. But he went 2-10 at Mississippi State, I believe. May have been 3-9. I think 2-10 though, which is pretty rough. Even at Mississippi State, he's got to do better than he did last year, else they're going to fire him. But again, I think he was given a tough deal. I think he's a good coach. I don't think he will, but he's on that watch list just because 2-10 is unacceptable at any SEC school that isn't Vanderbilt.
And I'll just say this, just because I want to be honest and transparent. How many games does Hugh Freeze have to win this year to not get fired?
7.
Yeah.
Given how well he's maybe even 6, but I'm going to say 7. 7 at 6, I'm not happy. 7, I'm not happy, but he's not fired because of how well he's recruiting. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. He's got to get at least 7 wins, and I don't think the fan base would be very excited, nor it's going to be hard for him to keep recruiting like he is if we can't ever win. I think if we maybe won 7 or 8 games this year, you see Naeem offered at Auburn, probably even better recruiting class than what we brought in. But I think with the roster he brought in, he's pretty safe to say we're going to win 7 games this year. So I can't put him on the you're fired list.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there, but it's just he's on the watch.
Yeah.
I unfortunately, but again, I don't think he will be by the end of the season. Now, moving over to basketball, Auburn basketball, and I guess SEC basketball as a whole. We talked about Auburn's dominating win against Missouri, where they kind of made a late run, cut it. I think we won by 16, 17 points. Looking across the landscape, other noticeable games that we saw. Alabama blew out number 12 Oklahoma. Very impressive win for the Tide. We saw Kentucky dominate Florida. I wouldn't say dominate. They beat Florida. Florida I picked in second in the SEC. I'd probably bump them back to third or fourth now after that one. But again, I don't knock them too much for losing at Rupp Arena in a game where they competed and played well. Whatever. Tennessee dominated Arkansas. Another big one that stuck out to me. Anything else stick out to you?
I thought Vanderbilt I think Vanderbilt had a pretty good win. LSU was my pick to get last in the SEC, but anytime you go on the road, especially with how good people think Vanderbilt was supposed to be this year, they were supposed to be a pretty bad team. And starting off the year with a road SEC win is definitely a good start, and they were a lot better in the non-conference than people expected. So I'll give them a shout out for beating LSU.
Yeah, and a couple more that I thought about what you were saying, that Texas A&M dominated Texas. Again, I'm very high on Texas A&M, not very low on Texas. So I kind of saw that one coming, but a lot of people didn't. And then Mississippi State, I thought South Carolina wasn't too great either, but I think I didn't have them in my bottom 4, but now I definitely do. The way they just got – Mississippi State's good. They deserve credit for it, but Mississippi State just dominated South Carolina in the Humphrey Coliseum. It was very impressive. Then, again, as I previously mentioned, Alabama – dominating number 12 in the country, Oklahoma. Now, 2 things can be true, okay? Oklahoma is not the 12th best team in the country. Oklahoma doesn't belong anywhere near the top 25. And I'm not saying that because Alabama beat them, and I'm trying to discount Alabama's win. It's not at all it. We talked about it last week. Oklahoma has just had a cakewalk of a schedule, and they ran into Alabama, which was a buzzsaw, and dominated them. But, again, the 2 things can be true. 1, Oklahoma is not the 12th best team in the country. Alabama did not beat the 12th best team in the country. But that was still an amazing performance against a borderline top 25 best team in the country. And Alabama deserves all the props in the world and deserves all the flowers for it. I kind of wrote them off. I said that they were a borderline top 5 team. I had them at number 6. They're definitely cracking my top 5 now. I'll give credit where credit is due. That was a good win.
Yeah, it's tough for me to still put them in the top 5. Everyone else in sports media is doing that. I think maybe both of us were a little too high on Florida. I know they went to play at Kentucky, but we got to see some more games play out. I think Auburn and Tennessee seem to be like the best 2 teams in the SEC. I mean, Mississippi State looked very good as well. And me and you were both high on Texas A&M at Mississippi State, and so, it's not like the teams that we were high on that Alabama looked that much better than, in my opinion. But I'm right with you. I don't think I had Oklahoma finishing 11th in the SEC, or no, I had them finishing 12th in the SEC. So I'm not. Again.
Well, let me ask you this. I think it's clear that there is a, I think Auburn's in a tier of its own. So looking at second-tier teams in the SEC, again, Tier 1, Auburn, end of list. Tier 2, I think it's a clear-cut 5 teams. Because we kind of struggled putting together a top 5. Because there was one team it sucked to leave out. I think there's a clear second tier, and that tier consists of Mississippi State, Texas A&M, Alabama, Tennessee, and Florida. Would you agree, or is there any other teams you would add, or maybe would you take Florida off? I wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, that's who I had in my 2 through 6 in my SEC rankings. The only team I think I had Kentucky at 8, and they looked pretty good this past week. That's just going to be a tough team to win at Kentucky. That's always going to be a tough game. So I expect them to actually finish pretty well in the SEC, just because I think they have one of the better home court advantages in the SEC. But yeah, I don't think I'm going to put Kentucky in that tier quite yet. But I think Kentucky and Arkansas are 2 teams to watch out for going forward.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, Kentucky I think has a right. Arkansas, to me, they're a joke. I don't think they're very good. And what I thought was funny is after we posted our top 5 predictions on Twitter, we had a lot of Alabama fans telling us that we were wrong, we were dumb, whatever. I think they had an argument for that. They certainly have an argument that they're a top 5 team in the SEC. I think they are a top 5 team in the SEC now. However, we also had Arkansas fans in our mentions telling us that Arkansas is a top 5 team. That's a joke. They lost by 100 to Tennessee. Tennessee's a very good team. They're number 1 in the country. But you're not top 5 teams in the SEC aren't going to Tennessee and getting dominated and not taking shoot-arounds before the game. That is Arkansas is a joke of a program. They're not. I'm going to say this. You're going to disagree. I don't think Arkansas is a top 10 SEC team. I really don't. Like I think I can sit here and rattle off 10 teams who I think are better than Arkansas this year.
Yeah, I mean that's fair to say. I think Arkansas is the only reason I have them as my 8th best SEC team is still kind of based off what I thought of them in the preseason. If you look at what they've actually done this season, nothing would show you that that's a top 10 SEC team. But
yeah, I mean, they lost to Baylor. Baylor lost to Gonzaga by 50. Baylor lost to 2 top 25 teams by 50. They're not impressive. I mean, Arkansas is just not doing much for me.
Yeah, any of these rosters, though, that were completely, Arkansas lost every single player but one. So that's what I said about Arkansas is watch for them in March because they did bring in a lot of good talent. It's just a lot of underperforming, like Janelle Davis from FAU, who they brought in. He was the leading scorer at FAU, and he's been terrible. But you look at the number 2 scorer over at Florida, the Martin guy. He's been really good. So maybe it's just they haven't built the chemistry yet, but yeah, you could end up being right. They might not even be a top 10 SEC team.
Yeah, and that's a fair point. But to me, it was just funny that they were in our comments saying, "Oh, we're a top 5 team. Y'all are sleeping on us." And I was like, "Yeah, you're right. I am sleeping on y'all.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about it. Certainly not worried about y'all at all beating Auburn."
Yeah,
but
I think we need to start a new segment after this week. Start next week. We're going to start searching. I don't really know what we'll call it. We can call it Idiot of the Week. We'll find one Twitter post to highlight of a prediction of something they said, and then we'll watch the games play out, and we'll go back to their predictions. Someone like Hogball Burner would have won it this week.
Yeah, or the what is the Jim Kong-un or whatever, that Alabama Twitter account that loves coming at us with a bunch of stupid. That account tried saying that Aiden Holloway trading Aiden Holloway for Miles Kelly was a bad deal for Auburn. Yeah. Keep dreaming.
Yeah. Anytime that account says anything, if you're a Bama fan, you got to be you got to be so upset because anytime he says something, the opposite almost always happens.
Yeah. That's from what I've seen certainly true. Okay, well, another thing we want to do going forward is looking at the games for the coming week because, as y'all have seen, the majority of times we post stuff online, not to be too arrogant, it usually comes true. So what we're going to start doing is we're going to start picking games who we think is going to win, and we're going to start keeping up with it. So first we're going to start off with the weekday games and move our way over to the Saturday SEC games. Michael, you had that list pulled up?
Yeah, and just wanted to say, if you follow me over at Jackson Arnold AA, you already know this, but going back to last year, I put out my predictions for every single SEC game, and last year I didn't keep a full tally. I was kind of on and off, but this year I want to do every single game, and so last week I was 7-1. The only miss being I had Florida to go in and upset at Kentucky. They were slight underdogs, and that was ended up being the best game of the week in the SEC. So. It wasn't a bad miss in my opinion. I was kind of worried because, as I said, winning at Kentucky can be hard. But so first matchup of the week, we got Tennessee at Florida. Miles, who do you got?
Yeah, they lost at Kentucky last week, but I got to go Florida. Florida at home, it's tough to go into the O-Dome and win. And I think they're a really good team. They're coming off a loss. They're going to be mad. Tennessee's a really good team. I mean, this is the chance where people have been saying on our side, Auburn fans, that Tennessee isn't the number one team in the country. Okay, you go and win there, you deserve it. Quite frankly, if we can't win at Duke, you go into Florida and win, you deserve to be number one right now. Who do you have, Michael? Give me Florida.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Florida. I think a lot of Auburn fans are quick to jump on Tennessee, calling them overrated, but I think a lot of that's because we want that number one ranking in the people. I think Tennessee is the real deal. I did not think they could replace Dalton Connect, but they almost have with Chaz Lanier. He's putting up pretty impressive numbers. Yeah, so I'm gonna. But at the end of the day, as you said, playing at Florida's tough. That's a good team. I'm gonna go Florida as well.
Yep.
So second on the board, this one's gonna be probably the toughest one of the games tomorrow. Kentucky at Georgia.
Yeah, I'll go first on this. Give me Georgia. You know what? I don't care. Give me Georgia. I think Georgia's a decent team. They got Ace the Newell, as discussed. They got some shooters. They didn't look very good in their first game, but it was on the road at Ole Miss. Ole Miss is a pretty tough arena to play at whenever their students show up. I think Georgia's got a solid squad, and again, I think Kentucky's good. They're not number 6 in the country. That's ridiculous. They're really reliant on the three-point shot to win, and they were on fire against Florida, and they could get on fire and dominate Georgia, but I'm going to bank on Georgia being a pretty good defensive team, doing better, and then Kentucky playing their first road SEC game. The Georgia students will show up because Georgia has a pretty good record, and it's Kentucky. Give me Georgia in an upset, beating Kentucky.
Yeah, I'm going to go Kentucky, but as I said, I think this, if I'm being completely honest, this is a toss-up. If this was on the weekend, it'd probably be a home game for Kentucky. We've been to Stegman Coliseum. We know how that goes. They don't have much of a basketball fan base. But I'm going to go Kentucky. I think it's going to be a close game. I think they have the better roster. Winning on the road is going to be tough. I don't think that's a really tough environment playing in Georgia's arena. But, yeah, as you said, the students will be there. But, yeah, give me Kentucky in a close one.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I can see that going either way. Next up, I'm saying Texas versus Auburn.
Yeah.
Auburn at Texas.
Yeah, I know we're both going to project Auburn to win this pretty easily. It could be a tough environment. Auburn's never played at Texas before. I know it's not an easy place to go in and win. I know Texas was supposed to be a lot better before this season. I think his name's Trey Johnson. I may have butchered that.
I think it's Mitchell. I could be wrong. It's Trey something.
Yeah. Anyway,
really good freshman.
Yeah. You're probably right. But yeah, he's a really good scorer this year. They brought in the Arthur Kamolagood from Kansas. He was at Kansas State and maybe Creighton.
Yep.
Older guy, supposed to be pretty good. And they have the guy. What's his name? Who was at Houston, then Arkansas.
Mac. Is that Mac or? I don't remember. It's Mark. Trayvon Mark or something?
Yeah. There you go.
Regardless, yeah.
But yeah, those are the 3 go-to guys. I'll be honest, I haven't watched too much of Texas this year. But from the results, I know you have. From the results I've seen, it shouldn't be a very competitive matchup. Obviously, winning on the road in the SEC is tough, but I'll go Auburn by 15.
And another player I'll throw out there for Texas, they have a guy, big guy, last name Shedrick. I forget his first name starts with a K. Shedrick. He's a pretty good defensive big man. Was once at Virginia, so he can play deep, but the offense isn't as much there. But yeah, Again, if you saw last week's podcast, I have Texas in the bottom 4 of the SEC. I don't think they're very good. I think we're going to dominate, even though the environment will be tough. And if they do somehow beat us, they will storm the court.
Yeah, next up, I got Mississippi State at Vanderbilt, which I think will be another game I think it'll be a close game. At the end of the day, I think Mississippi State has the better roster, and I think they have enough to go win on the road there. And that's another place that used to be a tough environment, not much of a tough environment anymore. I'm going to go Mississippi State here in a close one.
Yeah, I think Mississippi State wins too. But, I do want to throw one other thing out there. Everyone knows, Vanderbilt has one of the most unique courts out there. But I saw where number one Vanderbilt superfan Jalen Merricks, I believe is his name, talked about how their Coliseum can get rocking. And he's right. Like I remember back in the day, it made me start thinking. And I thought about when they had Jeff Taylor and they had John Jenkins. That they were one of the best teams in the SEC. Kevin Stallings was a heck of a coach. And their students showed up. It was a real tough place to play. It's still a tough place to play now because, just at the uniqueness with the benches being behind the basket and that kind of thing. But if they could start winning some games and their students start showing up, that's a tough environment to go play in. Last on the schedule, LSU, Missouri. What you got?
I'm going to go Missouri. Missouri's lost 20 straight SEC games, which is so it's kind of hard to pick them, to be honest. But I do think I think since the SEC is so tough, it's going to be tough for them to be it's going to be tough for them to win a lot of games in the SEC year. And the SEC this year, I think any other year, this would be a top upper half SEC team. But I think they have a pretty good roster. They look pretty good at the end of the game versus Auburn. I mean, can't say we were trying as hard as we were at the start of the game, but yeah, give me Missouri here, and I think they win pretty easily. I have LSU finishing last in the SEC, so if they're going to win a game in the SEC this year, it better be this one.
Yeah, I think this game's as boring as it gets. Give me Missouri. They're at home, but who cares? These teams are irrelevant.
Yeah, and we can start flying through these if we need to. But so then it moves on to Wednesday, and this caps off the rest of the week games. You got Alabama at South Carolina.
Again, it's going to be a blowout. South Carolina just not doing much for me. Give me Bama on the road.
Yeah, it looks like I remember South Carolina was trying real hard to get J.P. Pegues. Looks like that probably would have been a better fit for both of them. He'd probably be their second best player. I mean, they just did an awful job of bringing in guards. This team looks terrible. Colin Murray Boyles is the only decent player on their team, and it's hard for him with absolutely no guards on the roster. It's going to be hard to pick South Carolina in any game this year, but yeah, give me Alabama. I think I'll go Alabama by 12.
I think Bama wins by a lot.
Okay, so next up we got this will be right up here. After what you were saying earlier, we got Ole Miss at Arkansas.
Yeah, man, that's tough. So I'm gonna go Arkansas. I know I just talked a lot of smack about Arkansas, but here's a couple of things to keep in mind. Ole Miss, currently ranked number 23, beat Georgia. I just don't think Ole Miss is that good. I mean, Ole Miss went on the road and lost to Memphis. I don't think Memphis is that great. Auburn dominated Memphis. Mississippi State dominated Memphis, and Ole Miss went in there and didn't look too impressive. I think Ole Miss has a really good coach. I don't think they're that great. On the other side, Arkansas, I don't think Arkansas is very good either, of course, but they are 11-3. Their fan base is still relatively bought in at this point, so they're going to show up at home against a ranked team and be loud. And it's 40 minutes of hell. That's what they call Bud Walton Arena. So it's just a tough place to play. Home court advantage means a lot. While I think Ole Miss is probably a little better, give me the home team. Give me Arkansas, one of your few SEC wins this year.
Yeah, give me Arkansas as well. I think both of these teams look pretty similar this year with how the years have started off. So I'm just going to take the home court team. I think also just the more talented of a roster team. But yeah, it really could go either way, the way Arkansas has played this year.
Yep.
And then last up, this is another tough one, Texas A&M at Oklahoma.
Yeah, going to be a ranked matchup at Oklahoma. Usually you like to go with the home team in a close game, but I'm not. I'm going with the road team. As discussed, I just don't think Oklahoma is a top 25 team. I don't think they are. I think maybe they're borderline, but I think they're a middle of the pack SEC team, maybe a little better than Arkansas, but that's about it. Give me A&M. They're a veteran bunch. They know they can go on the road and win. Oklahoma, just not doing it for me. Give me the Aggies.
I'm right there with you. Yeah, I told you I have Oklahoma at 12th in the SEC, and I have Texas A&M finished in the top 5. I believe I put them at number 4. So it's going to be hard to pick against Texas A&M with that in this matchup. So give me Texas A&M, and I think they'll go in there and win pretty easily.
Okay. Let's move on to Saturday.
So Saturday, the first game of the day, Auburn at South Carolina. No questions. I'll just go ahead and chalk us both up for Auburn in this one. What do you think?
Since it's at South Carolina, I did say on the previous podcast that might be kind of tough just because they play a slow pace. They have a good big man, but I mean they had him on the roster last year. We dominated them twice, and they're even worse this year. So yeah. I think Auburn wins big.
If Auburn's going to struggle in a road game, I think it's going to be versus Texas.
I don't think we'll struggle on either.
I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you. So the second one, another tough one, kind of to pick, at least for me. We got Vanderbilt at Missouri.
Yeah, I have more questions for Vanderbilt than I do about Missouri. I think I think I kind of know what Missouri is. I don't really know what Vanderbilt is, but at the end of the day, give me Missouri at home. Too much volatility there with Vanderbilt.
Yeah, I'm right there with.
Yeah,
sorry.
Missouri.
I'm right there with you. I just picked the home. I'm picking the home team in this matchup. As I've said before, in college basketball, I think home court advantage matters more than literally any other sport. Professional doesn't matter the sport. College basketball is the hardest sport to win on the road. So with that being said, give me Mizzou. I've seen enough out of them to be able to beat Vanderbilt at home.
Yeah, I'm with you.
So next up, Florida at Arkansas. This is could see it going either way here.
I couldn't. I only see one result, and that ends with Florida winning. It's going to be a tough environment, whatever. But Florida's just a way better roster than Arkansas. It's really that simple. They have some veteran guys in their team.
Yeah, give
me Florida.
Yeah, I'll take Arkansas here. I'll pick against you here. I think just with that game being at Arkansas, if they win this weekday game, I think they can pick up some momentum and win this as well. If they lose to Ole Miss, I would like to change my prediction to a loss, but I'll go ahead and I'll pick Arkansas to beat Florida this week. So next up, I got Tennessee at Texas.
Okay, yeah. Not much to think about here. Tennessee, I get it playing on the road, but I'll say it again. I think Texas is a bottom 4 team in the SEC. I don't think they're very good. You mentioned Arthur Kaluma. I don't think he's very good. I think they have a good freshman. I think Shedrick's a good defender. Other than that, they don't do a whole lot for me. Tennessee.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. This is one I could see being close, but Tennessee's already proven that they can go and win on the road. They won at Illinois, who's as hot as anyone right now in the Big Ten. So, with that being said, I think Tennessee's the top 5 team in the country. Give me Tennessee. They're a potential Final Four team. So, taking them here. Okay, next up, we have Oklahoma at Georgia.
Look, you know me. As an Auburn fan who was born and raised from the state of Georgia, I love hating on Georgia. But Georgia basketball, you're in for an amazing week. Because not only are you going to get Kentucky at home and you're going to beat them, you're going to get a ranked Oklahoma team and you're going to beat them. And people are going to start voting for y'all to be ranked in college basketball. Georgia's a better basketball team than Oklahoma. I don't think they're a better team than Kentucky, but I think it's a good spot for Georgia at home and yada yada. They're a better team than Oklahoma. I think they're going to pretty convincingly beat the Sooners. So Georgia basketball might be on the up.
Yeah, this could be a big week for Georgia. At least after this week, this could be a big week for their fans to be hyped up about basketball. I don't think it'll last very long, but it will certainly look good for them having 2 ranked wins, especially one potentially against number 6 team. I think this is the last week of the season that we see Oklahoma being a ranked basketball school. Give me Georgia here as well. So next up, 3 more games. I think this next one's as clear as day. You got LSU at Ole Miss.
We'll be quick with this one. Ole Miss.
Yeah, Ole Miss. Okay, so next up, now this one might be the game of the week. Alabama at Texas A&M.
Yeah, Alabama's not winning this one. Texas A&M's going to win. No shot. Again, no shot at Alabama. I'm going to compliment them. It was a great win against Oklahoma. They deserve a bunch of credit for that. But, as you mentioned already, going on the road's a different beast. A&M kind of plays in a different style for them where they like to slow it down a little more, like to make it dirty, physical. And, again, they just have a core bunch of guys who've been there a while. I'm not sure if they're a better team than Alabama. It's close, but since it's so close, give me the home team in prime time. Who do you have?
Yeah, so going into the year, Alabama was preseason number 1 by a lot of guys, and the hype train kind of went down after they lost to Oregon and they lost at Purdue. And you're starting to see the Alabama fan base and their beat writers starting to pick back up. I saw one of national writers try to say, he said Alabama might be the best team in the state. I think this is where that hype train goes down yet again. I think Texas A&M wins big in this one. I've told you we're both on a short list of people who think Texas A&M is a top 5 SEC team. I think they're top 4, and I think Texas A&M is going to prove it this week. I think they're going to win big at home.
Okay, yeah. Then you said there's one more game, I believe.
One more game. This is probably the second best game of the week. Unfortunately, at the same exact time, you got Kentucky at Mississippi State.
Yeah, give me the Bulldogs. I think Mississippi State wins pretty big. Again, talk about clash of styles. You talk about Kentucky's a team that wants to get out and move it and shoot a lot of threes. Again, I think they're going to lose to Georgia because Georgia kind of plays that contrasting style and on the road. And again, they're playing on the road here against an even better team in Mississippi State, an even better Bulldogs. I mean, there's no way I'm going to be able to pick Kentucky. Not only is Mississippi State more physical than them and better on the inside, they're a much improved offensive team. So yeah, I think Mississippi State rolls Kentucky.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Give me Mississippi State. I mean, in years past, this has been a game where Kentucky has dominated. They've even been winning at Mississippi State, but I think this is the year Mississippi State finally gets them. Give me Mississippi State big.
Okay, yeah. So that'll do it for the SEC games this upcoming week. Mike, was there anything else you'd like to add to the podcast before we close out here?
No, basketball recruiting's kind of been slowed down. I expect Auburn to add one more guy. I know that we played Monmouth, and Monmouth's leading scorer, Bashir, we offered his twin, who's currently in junior college. So I would say next year, be looking out for both the Bashirs. The Bashir guy on Monmouth, who's averaging like 22 a game, he's a transfer portal target. I saw Bruce Pearl go up to him after the game and before the game. He was the only player Bruce Pearl went to in their line and went and whispered something into his ear. Yeah. And you even see St. John's coach is refusing to shake hands after the game because he said that coaches were recruiting his players in the handshake line. So I don't know if we'll see more of that through in the college, but it kind of seems like we were doing it. So be on lookout for both the Bashirs, and there was a guy who's been a 3-year pro in Israel who's looking to switch over to college basketball, and he's already said Auburn has interest in him. And Bruce Pearl loves Israel and he loves his Jewish community. So another guy to be on the lookout for.
Yeah, there's a couple things to be excited about. So we'll get on to wrapping things up here. Something to look out for on our next episode. I know a lot of the people out there were big fans of our Alabama correspondent, Ken Carino. He plans on joining us for our next episode. We'll talk more about college basketball, kind of look at games. We'll have him on and get his perspective on things for that, and also kind of get him to talk about how he saw the SEC going, and particularly have him look at Alabama and how he thinks that Kalen DeBoer is doing, and how the next upcoming year is going to be for the Tide. So that'll be something to look forward to on our next episode. But for now, I am Miles Espy, or Ashton Daniels AA, and this is Michael Espy. You know him as Jackson Arnold AA on the Twitter world. We're out. Y'all have a great rest of y'all's day.
Yeah, last podcast of Auburn not being the number 1 team in the country.
There you go. See y'all. Bye.